The Fishing Gurus Podcast.
Welcome to Baggers Bar, folks, for the latest Fishing Gurus. What are we going to call this? Podcast on the road, Tobe?
I think it was on the road, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks for being the first guest, Bagger.
No worries.
Tell us a little bit about this little den that we're in here.
This was my little lockdown project.
Was it?
Yeah. When the first fish I won, I thought, do you know what? I want to get myself a pool table. I've always wanted one of them. So obviously I got my pool table, realised I had a bit of space. Mrs. took over this side, made herself a little bar. I've got my pool table, it's all good.
She's done a cracking job, hasn't she? Good old Bex, look at that. We're going to do a few little podcasts today, so this will be the first one. So I reckon as the day goes on, we'll probably start slurring our words a little bit. Might move on to this top shelf. I know Tobe likes a gin, don't you, mate?
Yeah, I've already been eyeing up that Bombay Sapphire up there.
New format. We're going to do a little bit of travelling about the country, start doing podcasts in a little bit, different locations, and it should allow us to get a few quirky guests on who maybe can't come down to the studio. So exciting times for the show. But kicking off, wanted to chat to you, Bagger, about this year. I know that you've had a phenomenal one. If we talked about everything you've won this year, it'd be a 10-hour long show. But we've sort of had a little natter before and picked a few matches that you consider to be key, interesting ones, big wins. Some of them not so much wins as well. But tell us a little bit about the first one that we're going to talk about.
So the first one was the Angling Trust ZIF Final. Obviously it was at my local fishery where I fish all winter Bradshaw, so I was hoping to do well. I drew a peg, to be honest, that doesn't win that many matches. So like when I drew in the morning, I was thinking I could potentially frame, I might catch £20, £25 there. But I never thought for 1 minute I was going to win the match. But I'd fished there all winter. I've been catching loads of skimmers, fishing with ground bait, because it's a real mixed fishery. You can fish for roach and hide shallow. There's some big perch to be caught short. There's lots of roach to be caught short. Every day is ever so slightly different on there. I remember that day we had a cold easterly wind and it were blowing up towards our corner. And I just thought, well, I'm not even out of the wind here. It's just nothing really looked. It weren't a strong wind, but nothing really. I just thought, I'm not going to win from here. I've been so tuned in with the fishing, and it just went. It was just like a perfect match. Like I'd caught £37 in the practice match leading up to it off a good peg, 25, 26 area. So I was confident. I knew how to feed for him. I've been putting more worms in all of a sudden, whereas all winter I've been putting next to nothing in. But all of a sudden they woke up. The hide had stopped feeding. There weren't many shallow fish. The roach weren't really getting caught shallow. So it was like, for me, it was an out-and-out skimmer match. And the hide would, well, I say the hide weren't feeding. You couldn't catch them shallow. You could catch them on the bottom, feeding quite a lot of worms. But when I say a lot, I've only put a pint in all day. But for March, it's still quite a lot of worms. So yeah, I had a real good match that day. That was probably, the start of my year, if you like.
When this was sort of first week of March, wasn't it? 4th of March, I think the final were. And you won the match, you won the final with £31 odd.
£31 odd. I drew peg 14 on Lake 4. Everybody felt like you needed Lake 3 the day before because it had won the practice match. I think Cam Hughes had about £45 or something.
Yeah, I remember.
And everyone was like, well, you don't really want Lake 4, but Lake 4 is probably my favourite lake. It's a little bit deeper. There seems to be skimmers a lot. I'd say 50-60% of the lake has got skimmers in the pegs.
Yeah.
So if you could catch like 40 skimmers, they're only like 8, anything from sort of 5 ounce up to £1.25 is a big one. But 50-60 skimmers, maybe a few hide. And there just happened to be some fish there on the day, which surprised me, to be honest. Like 14's not... It looks a really good peg, but you've got 13, and there was a good angler, Steve Howard, on that, which is probably the best peg on that bank.
Yeah. Because
you have 2 spare pegs and you have a bit of room, and it was always a good hide peg, but it was always a good F1 area as well. So it had not been brilliant all year because the F1s had been over that side of the lake. And then 15 was a good short peg. So if the hide was there, being the end peg, you could catch a lot of fish short. I've been practicing with Adam Wakeling leading up to it, and he had £32 off that peg leading up to the final. So that I'd had a bit of form. So I was in a good area, but I just don't. I've been fishing there 3 or 4 years. It's not a peg that wins lots of matches. So
Yeah, you know it, don't you? You fish there a lot.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to win. Do you know what I mean? Like, but it just went perfect for me.
How much did you get for winning that final? Was it quite a big match?
$5,000 it was, yeah. So it was a nice payday.
Well worth winning. Well worth winning.
Really good match.
And obviously, selfishly, and I know people listening will want to know, like, give me a little bit of divulgence into the exact tactics on the day on the peg, because it sounds to me like you'd been fishing this place all winter. I see your match reports on Facebook and talk to you about it, and some of it's waggler fishing, some of it's shallow fishing, and you say it's changed very recently, close to the final, gone to more wormy skimmer fishing on the bottom. Like, how did you actually employ them learning things and tactics, and how did you fish the match itself?
So all winter you've probably been feeding, for example, I used to always feed 3 pints of ground bait. That'd last, so half a kilo, it'd last you pretty much all match that. You were feeding next to nothing in terms of ground bait. Feeding little balls, catch a few fish, topping up little balls with hardly any worms in. I'd probably say 50 mil of worms to 3 pints of ground bait. So next to nothing. An odd dead maggot in there, loose feeding an odd caster, but loose feed tend to drew the roach in, and that seemed to put the skimmers off. The skimmers like to be left alone, so you had to pot everything. That's
interesting. What do you think that, like, having roach whizzing about put skimmers off?
Yeah, 100%.
That's interesting.
My normal approach on there would be like, start short, catch a few fish, feed your long line. If you can't catch skimmers off your initial feed, then I'd start loose feeding for shallow, catch some roach, keep catching roach for the first half of the match, and then later on towards the end of the match, I'd change my short line as the roach tend to disappear. I'd change it to a skimmer line, and I'd fish for, like, say, 10 skimmers late, which might be £7 or £8, but if you're fishing for £25, you know, if you can catch 15 in the first 3 or 4 hours, you'd be putting like 20 odd pound on the scales every week. And if you had a good skimmer match, you caught a few off your initial feed long and a few extra short, you could get to 30 odd pound. But what I've been noticing is, like, short, you could start short sometimes and you could catch skimmers there. Now, the bank I drew on the final is not a very good short for skimmers, but it's better for roach and hide. The other bank, well, no, that's a lie. It's not better for roach, but there's a few hide to be caught shorter. It's a bit shallower. On the other bank, you can catch a lot of skimmers short as well as long. And what tends to happen on there is you feed your long line, you catch a few, and then the F1s move in, and it actually pushes the skimmers closer.
Got you.
Because they're trying to get away from the F1s. If the F1s turn up on the short line, you just get hammered. But what I'd found is you couldn't keep fishing that same line. Once the F1s congregated in that area, and it's the same when you fish these F1 lakes, you get bitted out off roach, and then all of a sudden it sits still. You know there's an F1 there. Once they vacate that area, once they take over that area, the silverfish just disappear. So you had to start a new swim. So on the day of the final, I'd fed 13 metres, loose fed short for an odd hide, an odd roach. I didn't catch many roach, caught an odd hide. But feeding a lot more worms, probably fed like a pint throughout the day. Whereas in the past, I'd been feeding a little handful, literally. Like next to nothing.
Significantly more then.
Just ground bait almost. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? With a bit of centre worm almost, like. Just feeding next to nothing. And like the ground bait was the big thing for me. And that's something to touch on as well, because last year I did design a ground bait just for skimmer fishing, which was a sweet pellet-based ground bait, Skimmers Dark by Blake's. And in the past, I'd always fed like something with a bit of emp and, you know, a cereal-based mix. And what I found is when I was topping up, you'd get loads of roach coming your peg. You'd get a mad little spell where they'd be off the bottom, and then you go back on the bottom, you catch a few, then the skimmers might arrive after it quieted down. Whereas with feeding an inert ground bait, you top up, and you didn't go in and catch a roach. Like, they weren't interested in it. Changing my ground bait this year, I definitely caught more skimmers because of it.
Nice.
Feeding it really wet, so it was like no activity. Almost feeding it like putty. Little balls of putty. Little balls of paste, if you like.
Is it dark in colour as well?
It's dark in colour, which I don't... It probably helps keep the F1s away.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% on colour meat, but it's dark. It gives you confidence that the water's clear. So that worked really well. Changing my ground bait 100%, but feeding next to nothing in the winter. And then it just started warming up. And obviously I've been up practicing with Waco, because he'd come up and stopped at mine for the
Adam
final.
Wakeling, there's a picture of him in your bar there, look.
Yeah, that was the night before, actually.
All right, night before final?
Before, yeah. And obviously, he wanted to try a few of his own things. He come up and fished dead positive because he fishes Medlands a lot in the winter. So we sort of come to an in-between, do you know what I mean? He was probably feeding 2 positive, and I was feeding 2 negative. And then we sort of stumbled across like, right, we need to feed this a little bit more worms. And then I fished on the Wednesday, like I said, I had 37 pound. And I always like to measure my bait, so I know where I've got a starting point. And it was like, right, I'm going to chop a full pint of worms up, 3 pints of ground bait. I probably used a bit more that day, probably used 4 or 5 pints of ground bait. So just still under a kilo. It's not loads of ground bait. But the key was like, put 1 ball in, go in, and I had a really good run. I probably had 15 or 16 skimmers off that first feed. Which
Big ball or?
No, like one sort of orange. I might have fed 2 actually. I might have fed 2 balls and then gone on it. I think I did feed 2. But not a lot of bait, not like 5 or 6 balls. And just fed them really wet, like stodgy balls, like I say, like putty. Gone in on that. Normally you'd get like 5 or 6 skimmers and then it'd normally go a bit dead and you'd have to fish shallow. But this is where the fishing had changed. If I was on the other bank, I think I would. Sometimes you'll go in on the other bank and it'll just sit there. And it don't make sense because you're in the best skimmer area, but you're also in the best F1 area. So you can sit there. And when I've drawn the best skimmer areas, 24 to 27, I never ever catch long on the pole. It's also the best F1 area. The F1's top at like 20 metres. I just don't think the fish like sitting on the long pole there. It's really weird. But
Wow.
You'll bag up short. When I won that match with £37, I had 3 lines short and I was just picking skimmers off them. Fishing 1 line. When the F1's moving, I start another line. So I might fish at, say, 6 metres in front of me. The F1's moving. I'll move 2 metres away, put a little ball in. The skimmers are straight on it. You get 3 or 4 skimmers. Then the F1's moving. So I go to my right, catch 2 or 3 skimmers. But because I've only fed a little tiny ball, you could go back half an hour, 45 minutes later or an hour later and go back on the same peg, do the same again, you get another 2 or 3 skimmers.
We got you, because they've cleared the bait out, so you're starting afresh.
And the F1s have then moved on to this bit of your bait, and
It's all about peg management, innit? It's so interesting. But if someone was sat next to you, and I say this so often when we're doing these podcasts, like they probably wouldn't even see you doing that.
No.
And I love it. That's why I love talking about it to you in depth, because people say like, how is he so good? Why does he constantly win? And that kind of thing, you wouldn't know you were doing it even if you were sat next peg, but it's so in depth and there's such good reason for doing it. Amazing.
It's simple fishing, and it won't work at a lot of venues. A lot of venues, you've got, take Medlands for example, it's too big of a lake. That sort of thing wouldn't work. But on Braddy's, you've got limited space. So sometimes it's like a game of chess. It's like, right, on the actual day of the final, so I'll go back to the final, I started at 30 metres, I had a brilliant run. I probably had £14 there in the first hour and a bit. So I've caught half my weight in the first 90 minutes probably.
Wow.
And then I didn't really get skimmered out, F1'd out, but it died a little bit and I was scared of topping up because I didn't want to kill it. I was waiting and eventually I'd catch a skimmer and it was like, I've had such a good start. I only need another 5 or 6 fish and I'm near £20 here because they were quite a good stamp as well, probably 12 ounces. And I topped up and I had another brilliant run, which is really unusual because you normally top up and it's an F1. As soon as you hook an F1, it's like, nightmare, because then they're there. Do you know what I mean? That's the downside to Brad. There's too many fish in there. But then that worked. I got another little run, so I probably got myself to £20. Dropped short, had an odd bite, but because I was stuck in between the 2 anglers, it wasn't brilliant. If I would have been either side, I feel like I'd have caught a lot more. Like Steve Airwood to me right, Arwood, he had a good run shot on the Ide, and I was like nicking 2 or 3, but then it'd go. And then I went back long and I thought, right, I'm going to come back a section like I do on the other side. I come back a section, potted some bait in, caught 3 F1s in 3 chucks, never had a skimmer. I thought, well, if I go long, it's going to be worse.
And F1s don't count, by the way,
They don't
folks.
count, yeah. So I thought, if I go long, it's going to be worse. And I put another section on with I was coming towards the end of the match now, an hour and 20 minutes to go. I went out to 14.5 metres, put a ball in there and caught steady till the end.
Skimmers?
And I thought, I can't believe that. I come back and I've caught them. Because normally you'd think, right, the fish have gone, I'll go longer. On the other side, it's the opposite. You work your way back in because The F1s are out there and they come close. You can catch them at 4 meters on the other bank because you've got sort of 6 foot under your feet.
Crazy.
On this bank, top 5, I probably only had 5 foot. So you're sort of fishing on a bit of a slope. And I come back and it didn't work. And then I went past 13 meters to 14 and a half and it worked. And I thought, so my match just went perfect, really. Like I say, I had £31. I think Cameron Hughes had a 28 and there was a 25. I think it was Steve Forster. And then it dropped off a little bit.
Yeah.
Brilliant match.
Nice one to win early on in the year, mate, as well.
Yeah, good. Because I'd put a lot of time in there as well. I really wanted to win that final. It was like my home venue, if you like. I spent all winter fishing partridge in Bradshaw's. And Lee had just picked me on the last round for the league.
Did he really?
I was leading the league all winter at Brady's, averaging, say, 25 pound a match. Had a really good league. Built up a 25, 30 pound lead going into the last match, bearing in mind 25, 30 pound to win the match. So I was nearly a full match ahead. And Lee went and dropped 78 pound of hide on the scales. And he beat me by like 20 pound. I had a really good match as well. I had like 36 pound on the last round. I thought, I'm 60 pound clear now. No one's going to catch 60 pound. Do you know what I mean? But I thought, Lee's on 10 on Lake 2, which is capable of catching a decent weight. It's not the best peg, but because it had gone a bit milder, he's ended up catching like 78 pound of hide, and he was like, sorry, mate. He said,
Great angler, Lee, though.
He's brilliant.
Fantastic.
But it's just like, I can't believe he's just jumped right up the lead and he beat me by about 20 pound. But there were probably 2 or 3 pegs that he could beat me from. Right. He drew one of them, and you can't put him on fish because he'll just empty it. It's class angler. And he ended up pipping me. So I was delighted to win the final on there. Because, I put a lot of time into it.
Well, well done, mate. Well done on that one. And moving on to the next thing that I want to talk about. It's another sort of silverfish-related event. That's the Winter Classic final at Medland. And there's a bit of a story to this one because there was a festival the week before that everyone went and practiced on. And I'm not allowed to say what you did really on the podcast, but you did very, very well. Some people would say you took the wee-wee because I think you won both matches, both days of the festival. And you'd never been to Medlands before?
No, I've been once doing a feature fish for carp in the edge, but I never fished for the silvers.
And it's a 10 grand final, the Winter Classic, so twice as much as the one that we've just spoke about. Big money. Tell us a little bit about that event, the lead up to it, and the final itself.
So leading up to it, obviously, again, because me and Adam Wakeling had both qualified for both finals, he goes Medlands all the time, I go Bradshaw's all the time. I went down there and he sort of like give me a good insight into how he'd fish, a lot of pellet fishing, a lot of caster short and stuff like that. So the first day of the final, I drew, I want to say peg 20 on the deeps on Lambsdown. And it was a 2-day festival. Gary Rogers on the Flyer TV festival. And I drew a good area. The deeps is famous. Do you know what I mean? Anywhere from sort of like 12 to 20 seems a good area. And I fed corn short that day, thinking if the big bream rock up, that,
What, loose feeding it?
Yeah, because sometimes, you can go to Larford, you can fish meat. It's miles better than maggots, casters. Like, you've got to pick the right bait to start with. So you can go there and fish worms, casters, maggots, get a bite chuck, catch the wrong fish, and it's hard to catch 40, 50, 60 pound. But if you're fishing for 30 pound, it's a great method. But if you need 40, 50, 60 pound, you need to be loose feeding bait, whether it be meat, pellets, casters, whatever it may be. But it's a deep lake, and you don't want to get to the bottom in 12 foot of water and catch 2 ounce roach fishing with maggots and casters.
No.
You need to be coming back with a decent stamp fish. So I gambled on fishing corn short. That didn't work. I had 2 carp on it. So my short line was dead. And I basically caught everything else on pellets long. But on Medlands, it's different to like Brady's. You put some bait down and the fish arrive, but it took me 40 minutes to get a bite because it's a massive lake. You've got to wait for the fish to arrive.
This is the first day of the festival, so this is your practicing for the final.
Yeah. And then it was quite simple fishing from there on in. I fished it just like I do at Brady's on Lake 2. That's like 9 foot deep, something like that. The peg I was on that day was probably 12 foot deep. So it's deep lakes, biggish rigs. And I fished micro pellets, 4mm pellets and expanders on the hook. So softened up 4mm fishery pellets, feeding micros and a few 4mm with a catapult. And it was basically just a case of like, put some micros in to start with, loose feed an odd pellet to create a bit of noise. Not many, because you can soon fill the fish up. So 6 or 8 pellets. And I'm sat there not getting any bites. I'm thinking, I've got this wrong today. Do you know what I mean? And then I got one. And then it just got better and better throughout the day. So it was a pretty easy match. I was on the right bait, because obviously Adam had given me a heads up that pellets was good. So I was on the right bait. I knew how to feed it from Brady's. You know, I'd cup a few micros in, catch a few fish, then I'd loose feed. That'd prolong my peg. Sometimes you get a slightly few better stamp fish, but then 4mm weren't very attractive, so you'd slow up. So then I put a few more micros in, like micros really attractant, 4mm would keep you ticking over. And I just had a brilliant match, £65, and ended up winning the match.
Must have caught some better fish, Bagger. You don't catch £65 of little skimmers,
No, I had loads of small ones to start with, but then I was catching like, I was coming back with a 12 ounce to a £2 most chucks late.
Wow.
Not loads of £2. A lot of them were like £1.25. But literally drop your rig and it sit there 30 seconds, it'd be like clunk, big skimmer. The fishing was unbelievable.
What rig did you use for that, out of curiosity?
I fished a gram rig.
Nice.
So gram rig with quite positive. I do like to fish positive with pellets still. So even in 12 foot of water, I had like a 4-inch hook length with a number 9 and then another number 9. My bulk was probably only about 16, 17 inch. So it weren't like a high bulk falling through, because otherwise you're missing bites. You're not seeing the bites. If you're catching these little skimmers, they can be a nightmare to show up the bites, and the light's bad at Medlands. So I fished really positive, to be fair, like quite a lowish bulk. Most people would fish a higher bulk, 3 droppers, maybe not as big a droppers, but I fished really positive, just like you would F1 fishing, really. Do you know what I mean? And that worked well. And you get a few lifts as well, because you'd be probably fishing 2-inch over depth, and your shot would be only 2-inch off the bottom. So a lot of them, they like lift it or they just go under.
Beautiful.
And I got some really good stamp fish later on, and probably had like, I'd probably say I had about a chuck for 4.5 hours once they arrived.
Great
probably
fishing.
Say £30 of little ones, like 4 to 12 ounce. They probably averaged 8 ounce. So probably had like 50 small skimmers, and then 20 decent skimmers for 30 odd pounds. So I probably had like 70 odd skimmers, I'd say.
Nice.
Great fishing. You know, in 4 hours, it's like 15 fish an hour. It's not like in and out. It's just nice, steady. Ooh, that's a good fish.
It sounds, doesn't it? You know, when you say to someone £65 of skimmers, you feel like you need to go like a whirlwind to get to that. But then when you break it down and say it like that, 15 fish an hour, steady away.
Yeah, it's like you could catch 5 fish in 5 minutes this big.
Yeah.
You know, and then you've only got to catch 10 in 55 minutes. It's one every 5.5 minutes then. It's like, when you have them good little spells, you don't realise how fast you actually catch. You could catch 2 pound-and-a-halfers in 3 minutes. You're catching, that's £3 in 3 minutes. It's like, you've only got to catch £12, £13 an hour, and you've just caught 3 in 3 minutes. It's like, it's a brilliant day's fishing, but it's not like, you're not catching 300 fish. You know?
No. And then...
So that was first day.
Won the match. Not a bad first ever match at Medlands.
Yeah, and obviously being on weight, I think Lee Kerry was second in the match that day with about 48 pound.
On the other lake, weren't he?
So I had about a 19-20 pound buffer or something like that, which is mega on there, because again, it's like half your weight. And then the day after, I drew over on the shallow side, and it had not fished. And like, I think my peg had 9 or 12 pound. The area was only one with about 18 pound. But this is where bait going in and where the fish are is really important, because it had been fished for 2 or 3 days now. I think it was there was the second day, wasn't it? Yeah, or the third day. But because it had been fished for a couple of days and some bait had gone in, like I spoke to Adam, who was actually next to me, but he gave me some good advice still. He's like, you know, you've got to go for it. Like, you might not get a bite for 2.5 hours, but when you start catching, they're normally bigger fish. And it only took me 40 minutes to get a bite. Everyone started catching after half an hour, 40 minutes. So I was catching even better than the first day.
And how did you fish second day?
Exactly the same.
Pellets?
16 metres this time, bit further. because I just wanted to get into that extra foot of water. It was about 7 or 8 foot, I would say.
Right.
And if I come back to 40 and a half, it was like 6.5 foot. And I just thought, if I just get over that ledge a little bit more, just give me a few extra bites. I might just catch 20, 30 minutes quicker. Might catch me 5 more pound. It was flat calm. The wind was off our back. So I thought, I can fish 16 metres. The shipping back's quite nice there. So it was hard work, but it was worth it. And I started short that day, and I thought, I'm not going to start on a feeder because I didn't take one. But that was
I thought you were going to come up with some real technical excuse then, like, didn't want to put any bait past my bowl line.
I was considering fishing a waggler. I thought, it's not that deep. I could fish a waggler, loose feed a few casters, I might get an odd fish.
Yeah.
But when I've sat there and looked at it, I thought, I can only feed I'm going to be spraying casters all over my peg. Do you know what? I'll just start short and see if there's any roach. Like, there's so many fish in there, you must be able to get a bite. And I caught 4 roach for £3 in the first 20 minutes. And I thought,
never.
I had 4 massive roach, like 12, 14 ounce roach, short on casters. So I put my pellets in, thinking I don't want to go on it too early. I want to leave that at least 45 minutes.
What did you feed at the start with pellets? How do you
same
kick
again,
your peg
like,
off?
So same as the day before, I didn't mention it, but 100 millimicros, scattered them around a big area rather than just dumping them in one pot. So scattered them over like 2 or 3 foot so they could graze on it, and then just pinged a few 4s as I was building it up. Not loads, just a few. And then I started short on casters, and I was happy to be blanking after 45 minutes. I just didn't want to go on that long line. I thought I'll leave them to settle. As soon as somebody catches the first skimmer, I'll wait.
But you weren't blanking because you got them big roach.
I caught these roach, but I was happy to sit. If I was blanking after 45 minutes, I wouldn't have gone out long.
Got you.
I would have left the fish. And as soon as he caught his third skimmer to my left on the long pole, I then went out there and I thought, right, there's got to be some fish there. And I dropped in, he went straight under, and that was that. But after 20 minutes, I'm thinking I'm going to catch £30 of roach here. But it's about 3.5, 4 foot deep. And I just fished a real light 3B8 rig, dropping through, just kept laying it in and throwing like 6 casters.
How far out?
Only like 6 metres.
Wow.
And then I caught like these 4 big roach, like I say, in the first 20 minutes. I'm thinking, if I just catch an odd one of these, they'd be good. Never seen one rest at day. That was it. I never caught another one of them. It was crazy. But I did change my match then. So what I did after that is I started filling it in with ground bait short, hoping that I'd catch some bream there late. And that just turned into carp soup. But I did have 4 good skimmers there. Just loose feeding casters over ground bait. But that long line was where I caught most of my fish. I had a real good 2 hours. Bigger fish, quicker. I was catching better than the day before. I'm thinking, like, they said it's not very good here. But obviously what had happened is the fish had come in. Like, they were like £30, £29, £27. I had a mega day. I had like £52, I think. And I ended up winning the match again.
Phenomenal.
So, yeah, that was quite good. But
2 match wins in 2 days. Clearly won the festival.
Yeah.
And this is the weekend before the big final, the 10 grand final. Talk to us a little bit about the final then.
So the final, obviously I'd done so well on Lambsdown. I went and drew the other lake that I've never fished in my life.
Yeah.
Warren. And I drew a peg that's very shallow. Probably the last peg you would want, I would say. I was on the right bank. The other side is a lot shallower. And then the corner up here is very silty and shallow. My peg was only about 2.5 foot deep.
Right.
But, like, again, speaking to Adam, because he knows the venue better, he's like, you don't really want to be there. Like, even he was amazed after the way I'd caught. Like, he said to me, I know you got beat by a few ounces, he said, but I never would have even thought you'd get close to that.
Right.
So you're on a point, but I'm facing this way. He said, if you was 1 to your left, you're fishing into the lake, you'll probably have half a chance. He said, but you never know, you might frame whatever. And I'd done a lot of that shallow water style of fishing up at Woodlands Thirst. Lots of little skimmers, just feeding micros, a little bit of stodgy ground bait, not loose feeding anything. So I started just dead simple match, 4x12 float, because it was pulling really hard. So 4x12 float and catching a lot of my fish, actually just letting me float go through. And catching them sort of 6 or 8 inch down my peg.
On pellets?
On pellets.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go down. I never fished there, and I just felt like pellets were the most positive way of fishing. So totally different to, you know, the other lake. Fed some ground bait short at the start and loose fed some casters for later. Went out on that long line, just sprinkled a few micros, feeding next to nothing basically. And and I was catching these little skimmers, 5s elastic, strung bulk because it's only so shallow, 4x12 float. I would have liked to fish the 4x10s if I could, but it's just pulling too hard. I've dropped it in, it was just not right. A 4x12s, you could hold it just still, or you could just let it edge through.
Got you.
But because it's so shallow, it does tow a lot. But I've used to that at Woodlands. I've done loads of it, and I caught a few on it, and then it died. And nobody had really mentioned ground bait to me, but I've always caught at Woodlands just feeding little thumbnails of like stodge, 2 or 3 fish, another little thumbnail of stodge.
In a
ground bait
pole pot? Or...
Yeah, in a little guru pole pot.
So it's on the end of your pole all the time?
On the end of my pole. Took my sprinkle lid off for my micros, put a little bit of stodge or like a, wettened up ground bait.
That same mix that you'd used at Braddy's that you told us
Skimmer's
about?
Dart, yeah. Few micros in it, not many micros in this now though. It's all about the ground bait and the attraction. Feeding that, and I was getting like 2 or 3 fish, then another little ball. If you fed all the time, you miss bites and you foul up to nodding. So it was like 2 or 3 fish, drop a little nugget in, catch a couple, and that was all right for a spell. And then it died on me, and then I dropped short and I caught really well short, and then it died. Went back long, and knowing what I know now, I should have probably switched to worms because. The kid to my left, I forgot his name. Oh, what's he called? I forgot his name.
Is it Trentman lad?
No, his missus was with him that day. I know him from Whiteacres. Baldish head stocky, he's in army, in marine.
Adam Palmer.
Adam was next to me. He swapped to worms and started catching some big skimmers. And he started catching really well, but I didn't know what he was doing till after that match when I spoke to him. So I should have changed my long line to worms, but I didn't know that. And then I went back long and I couldn't catch him on pellets. I thought, it's not right now, this. But luckily I dropped back in short and he had a mega run over ground bait, just fishing casters, catching these bigger skimmers. I've been catching loads of little wafer thin 3 to 6 ounces with an odd pounder. And then all of a sudden I'm catching these pound to 2 pound brown things short.
Miles bigger fish.
Fish. Fish that are coming in to feed, do you know what I mean? That was really good. And I ended up with 48 pound 8 ounce, I want to say, or 47.8, and just got beat. Well, just pipped you by 8 ounce, and Jamie just beat me by 8 ounce. So that was annoying, but I felt like I fished a really good match. And I'm not one to make excuses, but that was probably the worst match of the year for me because in the morning, my miss had rang me. My dog's legs had gone. He had a tumour of cancer. So we took him vets and that. Do you know what I mean? We knew he had cancer the week before.
Chuffing hell, mate.
I know. So it was like, if I could have concentrated and not had to take phone calls, but, don't matter.
It's a massive. Are you quite a dog person though, aren't you?
I love them, yeah. So
we've seen them this morning, obviously, when I come.
Mate, they're the best dogs ever, aren't they?
So
you come in,
cool.
they're just full of happiness. They're all over you.
little puppies.
Yeah.
We had about 6 months and then we got these two because it's just, my missus is besotted by dogs, so she couldn't live without them in her life. Do you know what I mean? But she felt dead guilty because she's like, oh, it's my fault. I've rang you. I'm like, I'm not bothered. Do you know what I mean? But it was sort of like one of them matches where I'd done really well. I felt like I had a chance of winning, then just got pipped by 8 ounce. But then I pipped you by 8 ounce, so it's like I've gained $2,000, but I've lost $6,000. I got 4, I think, for second. But as soon as the match finished, I was like, right, lads, can't be at the presentation. I've got to go home.
Yeah.
And I was driving home and just scragging my eyes out all the way home, just thinking, I've got to go and put my dog down now. Do you know what I mean? Back legs had gone. It was just a horrible day, but I fished a really good match. But it was a big match this year for me because it was one of the more memorable matches.
Yeah.
For the right and wrong reasons. I did really well leading up to it. Felt like I'd missed an opportunity.
But for a reason
that's it don't matter. It's
you
irrelevant.
can't help that.
Yeah, I mean,
you
dogs
can't help
come
that.
first.
And I think people listening always think that people like yourself or the top flight anglers, everything's always completely rosy and the personal life, stuff don't go wrong. But it's good to talk about it, mate, because everyone has stuff going on that affects them and the fishing 1,000,000%.
Yeah, it's like I topped up that day as well. With like an hour to go, I topped up, caught a few fish. And what I'd noticed, it's the same with a lot of skim fishing. You top up, it's like the bigger the ball, the longer they take to come back. So if I feed a small ball, they'll come straight onto it. I might catch one, but then I've got to top up again. Feed a big ball, might take 10 minutes to get a bite, but then I might catch 6 off it. And I remember with 12 minutes to go, I'm thinking, I need to top up here, I need to top up. But I don't want to because there's 12 minutes left. I might still get another 3. And they were like, what should I do? And I remember there being like 8 minutes left. And I thought, I've got to top up because I ain't going to catch one now. And I topped up after 4 minutes of not having one. It might have been 16 minutes to go and I did it with 12 minutes to go. But basically, I got a bite with, say, 5 minutes to go. And then I caught 4 skimmers one after another. And it was like, if I'd have topped up 2 minutes earlier when I thought about it, they'd have been on it quicker.
And were they them good uns?
The good ones,
well?
yeah.
Oh.
So it's like £5 in the last 4 minutes. You know, dunk big skimmer. And I knew, but I was just thinking, I can get another 2 here in the last 10 minutes. But then it was like, nah, I need to top up.
Yeah.
They'll be in the area, it's so shallow, they just back off. You know, and I'm flicking it round my feed and I'm like, they're not hanging off the back of it. And then they come back on and it was like, bump, bump, bump. And I thought, oh, I would have topped up 4 minutes earlier when I thought about it. That'd have won it for me. And then I was driving home, it was like, should have done this. Bleeding dog's not well. Like, a good day turned into a crap day.
Yeah.
But, like I say, it's what it is.
Still won 4 grand and come second in a massive final. Won festival week before.
Yeah, so it's memorable for the wrong reasons. But yeah, that was probably my start of my year. They were my 2 most memorable matches.
Yeah. Good to have an hour about them now as well, because everyone's going to be doing that sort of fishing now, like commercial silvers. There's loads of stuff at Medland's, Bradshaw's coming up. So people will be able to hear how you went about it, definitely. And the final match that we've got down to talk about, very different result to what we've just said, because obviously you were just the wrong side of it in the 10 grand final at Medland's. But Match This Final at Hayfield this summer. Yeah. £50,000 at winner. Andy Bennett, third big money final. I said big money final. There's a lot of big money events now, but you're talking 50 grand. Yeah. Has all the fish shows that you've won been 50 grand? Yeah. So you've won 2 50 grand Fishermanias, and this was the third £50,000 final. Tell us a little bit about that. Wow. Yeah, so obviously the Match This, I'd won fish show obviously up at Hayfield twice. Hayfield's always been brilliant to me. It's a venue I like. It's big lakes. You can be positive with your feeding. It's not like tippy-tappy pellet fishing. It's like you can be aggressive. And that's what I like to do there. Like, I catch a lot of fish fishing on the bottom there. You know, I qualified for the Maver doing it. I qualified for the Fishermania the year previous doing it. And that's when it really clicked in for me, because I remember Paul was in the Maver the year before. Paul Holland. Yeah. And he come to sit behind me, and it was bright sunshine, flat calm, fish cruising about. And I remember starting shallow on the island pool this is, on the same peg that I'd won the first Fishermania off, and I qualified for the Match This doing it. And that particular day, so going a bit off subject, but that particular day, I looked down bank and every single person is fishing shallow, slapping a rig for carp or chucking a waggler. Yeah. And they stocked it with all these new stockfish, like 2 to 5 pound carp. And I'm sat there 20 minutes later, I thought, it's not right, this. Do you know what I mean? I'm getting an odd little new stock carp this big. Nobody's hooking anything. I thought, I'm going to have a look on my deck rig. And I remember Paul say, well, he said to me after the match, when you pick that rig up after 20 minutes, I thought, what are you doing? Like, what's he doing here? I dropped in on the bottom in 12 foot of water, baking hot sun. But most people won't have even had a rig up to do it.
Nobody on the bank had a rig set up for fishing long pole on the deck. Not one person set a rig up for it. And after 2 hours, I had £100 in the net. And it went like clunk, clunk, because that's how they want to feed. You know, like, people look into air pressure and stuff like that, and it does have an effect on them. When it's high pressure, they don't really want to be on the bottom. But when it's average or low pressure, like, you've got every chance, even if it's warm, that you could catch them on the bottom, especially carp. F1s are different. They're a nightmare. They just want to sit up sometimes. But what have you got to lose by setting it up? Do you know what I mean? And I dropped on bottom, and it was just all these new stock carp. It was unbelievable fishing. I had £177 in the end, but I had £100 after like 2 hours. It was just like clunk, clunk, every single go in.
And that's where you learnt about this important method of fishing on the bottom at Hayfield.
Yeah. And it's just like, that worked a treat. Nobody set it up. It puts people off sometimes. When people go and fish snake lakes that are 5-6 foot deep, when they go on a big lake and it's 12 foot and you're fishing big rigs and it's a bit windy and you're trying to put your rig in, it puts them off a little bit. You know, it's easier to fish a bomb, or it's easier to fish, but bomb's nowhere near as good as the pole. And I'd always found at Hayfield, when you feed that bomb line, your pole line is, the fish will stay out there. Free offerings, they'll stay out there. Your pole line's never as good. So you've almost got to have the nerve to not feed a bomb line.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what I do a lot. And leading up to the match this, I was like, I've practiced the bomb. I've won the second Fishermania fishing the bomb. Like, I know how to fish the bomb if it's needed. But I'd gone up for a practice, filming a live match for Paul, and it was a rod-only match. So I basically fed 6 mils on the pole line, chucked my bomb on it. After an hour, I had 50 pound on it. I thought, right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to feed long after an hour. Started feeding long after an hour. After an hour and a half, I never had another bite on the pole line, chucking my bomb there, all match. But I caught 170 pound on a bomb long.
But do you think that that's because you've fed your pellets further out, all the fish had gone out there,
Yeah.
and they're never going to come back in then?
Why would they when you've just got all these loose offerings? You can be a lot more accurate at 14.5 metres than you can at 30 metres. You know, I can group my pellets quite well at 30 metres, but you're still talking 6-8 metres square at least. You know, I don't even know. Like, probably as big as this room, if you like. Yeah, probably 6 metres square. Your pellets are going to spread over. So they've got a big area to graze and avoid your hook bait. Whereas on the pole, you're talking like 3 metres square, maybe 2 metres square. Yeah, 2 metres square. But a lot of the time you can feed them really accurate and you're fishing in a metre square. So I just feel like you can read your peg better. If you get in liners, you can come shallow. So my plan leading into it was like, I don't want to feed a bomb line. I want to keep everything on the pole. I'll have a lull spell in the middle, but then I'll come back strong. And I drew peg 39 where Jamie was in the final. I drew that in a practice match 2 weeks previous, and I won the match with £235, and I didn't fish it properly for the last hour and a half because
On the method.
on fishing long on the deck,
Yeah.
I was getting one a bung, caught really well early. Then they went, tried shallow fishing went right on that lake. You'd see cruising fish, but they just wouldn't take your bait. And the more noise you made, the more you spooked them and scared them, which I'll come on to in a minute. And anyway, I'm feeding it. I thought, I'm not fishing the ball. I'm just going to stick on this pole. I dropped back on. I had to go for skimmers short. That was no good. Went back out on the long pole, won a chuck. And I've ended up absolutely emptying it. And then a lad walked down. I thought he was in final, so I put it down. I was like, no, it's too good at the minute to I can't show him how good this is. So I put it down. I was getting one a bung. I thought, I'll go down edge. I'll have a practice down edge sort of thing. So I had £235. I could have caught 260, 270.
Wow.
Easy. And then after the match, Jamie's weighed. Someone said, oh, Jamie's got £250. I thought, I've cost myself match it. I still want to win. It's like 250 quid for a winner. But anyway, he only weighed 225. So I ended up winning match. Jay was second.
Yeah.
So that was a good practice
Jamie
match.
Hughes we're talking about, aren't we?
And that was a good practice match. I'd had a good practice match on the rod only. Not so much like the methods of fish, but just understanding where the fish were, where they wanted to feed. Pellets, it's always pellets there, so the bait don't change. So you've got to understand the fish and the watercraft of like, this is how I need to be feeding. This is where they want to feed. If I do this, this happens. You know what I mean? It's like, and then I've got to have the guts to do it. And not feed, like don't panic and feed too many lines. Well, I'll do this just in case this don't work. It's like, no, this is how I want to fish. So that was that. And I've been travelling up with Christian. Christian kept drawing the other lake and I kept drawing the Big Adams.
Christian Jones
Was on the little lake and he kept catching a few shallow, but you could on that lake. And I was like, I can't catch shallow me. And I remember ringing him. I was like, he's like, I've had 6 carp shallow. I've got £50. I'm like, just have a go on bottom. Well, I'm catching shallow. I said, and Christian's a nightmare for it. He's like, I'm catching shallow. I'm like, yeah, but listen, you're here to practice. Go on the bottom. So he's like, right, I'll have a go on bottom for you. So he went on bottom and he's like, yeah, there's some bites to be had. I went, right, you can go back shallow now. I said, but you just got to work out. And he's like, yeah. So he's caught half a dozen on the bottom.
Yeah.
So I'm like, right, at least I know I can catch some fish on the bottom on that lake as well as. But he just wanted to catch fish. Christian's not a very good practicer. He just wants to win, and that's it.
Every match he goes on, I'm fishing to win match.
I'm fishing to win match. You know, I did it on Fishermania, went up there, won 3 on the trot. He's like, yeah, but you might be giving the method away. Yeah, but I was getting one a chuck down edge. I'm like, you know, We fish for 50 grand, mate. You can't be telling everyone. Yeah, we call him Fog On.
Do you?
Yeah. Because after the match, one of the things he does after the match, he always goes round and he'd be like, "How did you catch Chris?" And he'd just tell you anything.
Yeah.
He's a nice lad. If you want to know anything, you just go up to Chris and say, "Oh, you done really well there, mate. How did you catch them?" He'll tell you absolutely everything. So one of the jokes we have with him is like, I was stood him back at Van after practice match, and we always take the mix. He's walking down to me, and it's like, "Lads, I've fished pellets shallow. Oh, lads, they're on the bottom in 12 foot." I'm like, "Yeah, but everyone knows." I'm like, "Everybody doesn't know. You think they know.
They know now.
But they don't know. Like, they know now because you've just gone and confirmed it to them." But that's the thing. Yeah, it's like, that's what he's like. Fog On, yeah. But I'm like, you got to keep a bit back, because even though he was in the final, I wanted him to do well.
Yeah.
We're telling each other everything as we're driving there and back. So I'm telling him all my little things that I know. He's telling me what's happened on his lake. Even though I hadn't practiced on that lake, I knew what was happening. And exactly the same happened on the final. Chris drew rubbish, to be fair, on the final. But if he'd have been on some fish, he would have been on the method. Do you know what I mean? Whereas what happened on the actual final, the conditions went a little bit rubbish for me, for my style of fishing. I wanted it cold, wet, windy, all the fish on the bottom. Like, that's how I wanted it. Got there, driving up in the morning, there's not a cloud in the sky. It's gone from 15 degrees to 25 degrees.
Oh, no.
High pressure, like sky high pressure, 1,028 or something like that. And I'm thinking, this is going to be all wrong for what I'm doing. But I was so confident, and I knew I couldn't catch him shallow on that lake. I was so confident in what I was doing. I thought, right, I'll start mugging, because there's an odd fish cruising about. I'll throw some pellets short, and then I'll see how we go from there. So I didn't feed me long line for the first 6 minutes. I'm sat there after 6 minutes. I'm thinking, I can't sit here mugging. So we're on to the final now, the match.
Were you on a good peg, or?
Best peg on the lake, but wind off my back. Didn't look. Normally you get to that peg and they're rolling at 7-8 metres.
Wow.
They live near the bridge.
Right.
There's normally loads of fish about. I've been there, practiced that area, because there's no point sitting on rubbish pegs, but I'd been there, and it's like they always top near that bridge and all the rest of it. And they weren't doing that day. And there weren't lots of cruisers about either. And the wind was off my back. The conditions couldn't have been any worse for that peg. 35 on Big Adams next to the bridge. I think that 81 and probably Jay's peg 39, where the weaker was, they were my top 3 picks. I didn't really want to be on the back lake, the Little Adams, but then it won the match the week before. Jamie and Christian both had over £200, so it threw a spanner in the work, and I was like, do you know what? I'm not really bothered where I am as long as I'm in certain areas.
Yeah.
Didn't want to be in Dead Man's Bay and all the rest of it. But it mixed it up. I couldn't pick where the winner was going to come from.
Which makes for a fantastic final, doesn't it? What a great venue Hayfield is for that.
And it was a fantastic final. Like, we'll talk about that in a bit, but it was so close. It doesn't look it, but it was so close. So, start of the match, I've gone out mugging. There were an odd fish mooching about, and I was like, where are they all gone? Could not see a fish. I sat there for 6 minutes, and I'm like, just be patient. This is what Andy Power and Jamie Hughes would do. And I'm looking around, I'm throwing a few pellets short, and I'm like, I can see Jay, he's got one on. Powers has already had 2 mugging. I'm like, yeah, it's a mugging day, this. Just be patient. I thought, I can't do this. Threw it up the bank. I thought, I can't. So that was it. 3 pouchfuls of pellets. Let's get on the long pole. But I dropped in short. It took me 17 minutes to get one. I remember looking at my clock, and I'm thinking, it should have gone by now. So I've probably sat there for 11 minutes, say. I'm like... This
is on the method, on the bottom.
No, this is short.
Short.
And I caught one 6-7 pound. But then after 22 minutes, I'm like, they're fizzing on my long line. And Connor Barlow's my bank runner. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm going to get another one short. I'm going to go out long. So I've gone out long because they're fizzing, and that was their giveaway. I've had £70 after an hour and 20 minutes. I'm absolutely flying. I knew I was winning the match. Not many people. I had 10 carp on the bottom long, and there was all good stamped fish. Sometimes you can catch 4 or 5 pounders. These were all 5 to 8 pounds. You know what I mean? There was averaging 7. Resident fish that live on that peg. It's weird because on that peg, you always get these fat, stumpy mirrors, and they live around the area. You always seem to catch them on them 2 pegs. And they're just like real fat. They don't look big, but they're that big, and they're just solid as rock. They just must be resident fish that live near the bridge. And I was catching them. The week before, I'd had 25 carp for £119. They were all little scratty things like this. I never had one over £5.
Got you.
I thought I had £135 and weighed 119 and was miles out. So this day I'm fishing and I'm thinking, that's a heavy fish, that. Do you know what I mean? It's £7, it's £6. So after an hour, hour and 20 minutes, I'm thinking, I've got £70 in net here.
Did anyone else clock that you were so far ahead?
No, because what happened was, really, I said to Connor, when they come round, I don't want to Maver them with cameras because I want to catch in my edge.
Yeah.
Just knock a little bit of weight off. Like, if I've got £45, tell them I've got 35. When he come down the guy, and it's a bit naughty, but you fish for a lot of money. I don't want cameras spoiling my chance. So when they come round, and I'm right there, I'm going to catch on a top 4 in the edge. I don't want them crossing the bridge or anything like that. And he come round, I had £70. And the guy says to Connor, it weren't Andy Kinder, I don't know who it was. He's, what's he got? He said, £35. I was like, I meant knock a bit off, not like half it, do you know what I mean? So all match, they're thinking I've got nothing. So all match, they're thinking I've got nothing, but I know I'm leading. So when I've caught 2 more fish, I've got £84. I can hear on the tannoy that 60's winning. I'm thinking, well, I'm still winning. But the middle of the match just went rubbish. It went flat calm. There were no fizzing, no bubbling, nothing. But I felt dead guilty about that because at the end of the match, we'd added our weight up and we still got it wrong by £15. So we were still well out of what we thought we had. And
what,
then
up or down?
Down. I thought I had 110. I weighed 125 in the end.
Right.
So we were still miles out. So I think Connor's missed a fish or something, or I've missed a fish or whatever, or I don't know what happened. It's only £3 or £4 a net in it, so it's not a million miles out. But yeah, I never thought I'd won for 1 minute. So I'd had a brilliant start. My match is going plain sailing. I said to Connor, it can't be this easy. Like, I'm going out, I'm feeding pellets aggressive, clunk, not missing a bite, no liners, not foul looking anything. I think I had 1 foul look and I got it in. It's like, this can't go any better.
Is there any little things, like, I know you too well and I've got an opportunity to ask you this now, but like, surely it's not as simple as just firing some pellets in and fishing on the bottom. What is there an odd little thing you can tell us that, you know?
You've got to fish aggressive.
Yeah.
So it's no good firing 10 pellets. So I'd be like 20 pellets. I feed 3 times. If there's a lot of fish there, I feed twice. But if there's not, it'd be like, I want to get the fish grazing.
What's the noise? Oh, that's nice.
I want to get the fish grazing. Do you know what I mean? I don't just want a fish coming in and one fish in my peg. I want them to be ripping the bottom up. I want them to be feeding aggressive. Hook bait was massive. A single 8mm scretting light coloured pellet was by far the best.
Right.
I've caught on red pellets on the bomb in the past on there. I've caught on double red pellet on the bomb. I've tried double red pellet in practice on the pole, no good. Single red pellet, no good. Fishery 8mm copping pellet, which they are there, no good. 6mm fishery, what I'm feeding, no good. Like, this hook bait was by far the best.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, whether it's light, they see it better because it's a pale colour. It's almost like a dog biscuit, do you know what I mean? Colour, like dog biscuity type thing. And that was my best hook bait for shallow the year before. It's just a hook bait I've always caught on. I've got a little bag of pellets. I've probably literally got about 100 left. And it's just what I always use for that. If I'm using them on the waggler, that's the hook bait I go to straight away. It's just a nice light coloured scretting 8mm. But it was by far the best. When you put a copping on, they're a little bit longer, a lot heavier, like twice as heavy. I just don't know. It wasn't as good. Do you know what I mean?
But this is what I mean, though. Again, like we spoke about earlier, like you just had a conversation there about hook baits. How many other anglers on that match would just use a 6mm Coppins pellet or an 8mm Coppins pellet? I'm saying 90% of them. Possibly
a lot will just feed and fish what they're fishing, or just put an 8mm fishery pellet on.
Yeah,
but it's not really a secret. I spoke about it when I did the video with Frankie. An 8mm feeding short pole. That was the hook bait, the best hook bait for me. But yeah, I think some people, they don't take in, they hear it, but they don't act upon it a lot of the time. But hook bait choice was massive. The amount of bait you fed was massive. If you fed too little, you foul hooked them. And you think it'd be the opposite. But it's a venue that I'd like because you've got to be aggressive. And I caught really well on that. And then it went, and when it went, they stopped fizzing. I never had a bite there the rest of the day. But the damage was sort of done. And then I went shallow, and I went out shallow, slap, like you do. And it was rubbish. Like, there were no bites to be had. I got one out of the blue. I was like, right, here we go. Then I lost 2, which was pretty costly because one of them was about £8. I got it to net. It was just under its face.
Right.
Sorry, let me just turn my phone off.
It'd be Alan Scawthorne messaging you for some tips again, is it?
Dave McCauley.
Oh.
Delete him. Yeah, so like, shallow fishing was rubbish. And what it was, because the water was clear, you'd see fish cruising, but when you slapped, nothing would come near your pole tip. They were scared to death of it. When you went on the bottom to see if there was any fish there and you'd feed, you'd see a fish swim past your float or near the back of your feed. So it was obviously all down to noise, wasn't it? And I didn't cotton on to this. Like, if they could change one thing about that match, I'd have just fished a long line rig and just flicked it past 2 pellets, flicked it past, took my brain out and just swung that for 2 hours in the middle of the match. And I would have caught 5 or 6 doing that because I would have had enough chances. But I sat there, I'm slapping. Well, this is how I've always caught them in the past. It's irrelevant what you caught in the past. It's what works on the day. And I should have just flick rigged it. Long line, flick rig, a few pellets. Because it's that time of year. And I've seen it before. And this is where the experience of being in these finals, it comes back and you know. So I've learned something for next time if I get there again. Or if the Fishermania's on there or whatever, any events on there. That time of year, I've learned something. If the final was in July, you'd be just catching slapping. The fish would come to the noise. And Christian had said to me, you know, the best upbait is a normal 6 mil by a million miles. That 8 mil is no good for shallow. Now, that has always been my best shallow upbait, but I'd not caught many fish shallow. He had. So he'd had 200 pound shallow, 180, 170. He'd been catching fish shallow. He was confident. So I learned that 6 mil was the best upbait from him. But again, I didn't really catch a great deal shallow. What I should have done that day is literally, like I said, I should have just stopped slapping because I had one fish doing that. But then when you've not had one for 20 minutes, you think, I'm going back slapping. So you go back slapping. Another 20 minutes has passed. And it's like, I wasted the middle part of my match, basically.
Got you.
But I could have made it a lot easier if I'd have just plopped a little pellet and just not made much noise. Because every time you kept it still, a fish would come near. As soon as you made noise, they just back away. So that was that. That was one thing that I would change. And then I basically threw pellets short and I caught really well on that. Again, feeding aggressive like I did on the long pole. Same upbait. Fishing in about, it's lovely that peg, 5.5 foot of water. And I caught 6 there. Lost 2, but I got 1 in foul hooked as well. So it sort of evened itself out. And I'd probably like £102 or something with, or whatever it may be, £100 with 10 minutes to go. And I'm like, Jamie's got £118, I'm thinking in my head. That's what me and Connor had him down for. And I'm like...
Is Connor adding his weight up as well then?
Yeah, Connor's keeping track. He's like, he's had another one, £6. So on his phone, I'm like, you just keep track of what he's got so I can make a decision as what I'm going to do.
Right.
That's the most important thing. I fished my own match. Connor did actually say to me, like, he could see it a lot clearer than me. He's like, have you tried just flicking it and not making much noise? Like, Jay's leaving it there quite a lot. So he's watching Jamie and going, he's not moving his bait much like you. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like slapping and getting no signs. He's like, he's leaving it like 20 seconds sometimes. But to me, it's like, well, I've never caught doing that. Do you know what I mean? I don't really want to leave it there. Like, but Jay were mugging a few and getting a few shallow fish. But he was feeding 4 mils rather than 6s as well.
Right.
So he might have been getting a few crassios and whatnot as well as. But with 12 minutes to go, I think it was, I'm like, I'm going to go in the edge because I ain't going to catch 2 there for like £12, say. But I could catch 1 £12 in the edge. I could actually catch 2 in the edge. And with 15 minutes to go, I've started seeing an odd sign down the edge.
Had you been feeding it?
I've been feeding it all the time. I've had a look after an hour, with an hour to go, nothing. I had a look with 40 minutes to go, just a quick 5 minutes, nothing, back short. And I swapped between the edge and short. I thought, with an hour and a half to go, I thought, I have to catch short to win. I ain't going to win fishing shallow. Caught 2 fish in 2.5 hours. It ain't just going to come black all of a sudden. I need to fish in that edge. And I've dropped an edge with literally, I think about, say 8 minutes to go. I'm thinking like, I've had 1 shot. I thought, I ain't going to get another one there now. I'm not getting any bites. Dropped in the edge. And there's fish there, and they won't take it.
And what were you fishing down there?
All hard pellets. So feeding 4s, fishing an 8 mil. And they're swimming around my float, and I was like, go under. It won't go under. And I'm like, nah, that's it. My chance is gone. 20 seconds to go, it's gone wallop and it's gone under. I've hooked one, netted it after time, probably 10, 11 pound. It was about that big, but I picked it up, I was like, Jesus Christ, that weighs some, that fish.
Yeah.
But Jay's had another fish. So I'm thinking, well, I've got 111, 110 pound. He's got 118 plus that fish. He lost his, apparently. I didn't know, I just thought he'd had it. So it was a lot closer than we was thinking. But Jay was like, no, I've only got like 110. I weighed 125. And I thought, nah, he'll still have that. Do you know what I mean? I've got him down for 118. He'll weigh 130. He's going to just beat me here. And he's like, I promise you I haven't got that. So I says, well, do you want 10 grand? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh dear, I'll just give 10 grand away.
Is that what you said to him? Do you want 10 grand?
Yeah, I said, do you want 10 grand? And he's like, sort of calling his bluff a little bit, but also knowing like it's going to be mega close.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for Jay, and I think he would do the same with me in that situation.
Would he have offered you that, do you think?
If he thought it were close, and it's because it's a lottery then, isn't it? It's like, well, I've roughly got this. I've got this. Jay said, I've not got that. I promise you, I've not got that. And then I offered him 10 grand afterwards, even though he said it. Not that I didn't trust him, but I just thought, nah, he'll have more. And I thought, if I win, I'm not bothered anyway. So and when he said, yeah, I was like, yep, I've definitely won this, because I could just tell by his face. Like,
So I bet it just dropped.
Jamie's not bothered about the money, do you know what I mean? He just wants to win titles. He's not bothered about the money. He's got enough money, but he was gutted because he wanted to win. He wanted to win it. Do you know what I mean? He wanted to be the first person to win it twice. And as soon as I said it, I just looked at his face and I thought, yeah, I'll just give 10 grand away.
No.
I'm not bothered. Like, it's only money. Do you know what I mean? I was like, well, if I have one, I'm absolutely buzzing. And I don't care if I give 10 grand away. But as soon as he said it, I knew at that point I've won, because I knew none of the others had caught enough.
And if you hadn't won, you're getting 10 grand off Jamie.
Yeah. So it's like, because it's a lot of money, isn't it? It's like 5 grand, 50 grand. So I can win 40 or I can win 15. So Jay come away with 15 grand. He's absolutely buzzing.
Yeah.
Well, not buzzing because he wants to win the title, but he's coming away with a nice payday. It pays for all this year's competitions, all next year's competitions, all the year after's competitions. He's free rolling for the next few years again.
Yeah.
And, being like full-time anglers as such, if you like, it's what we do for a living. It's nice to have a bit of money to pay for your fishing, because it costs a lot to do this. Do you know what I mean? So for me, just to win that title, it was like massive.
So what were the results? Tell us about the result.
So it looked.
I feel like I'm there now. I've just done a deal with Jamie Hughes for 10 grand.
So it actually ended up really close. I had £125, but take that £11 away last chuck, £10. I've got 115, say. So that fish that I thought didn't make a difference was very close, because Jay lost one. If I lose mine and he gets his in, it goes the other way, he probably beats me by £1. Oh. That's how close it is, do you know what I mean?
Wow.
The same thing happened to me in Fishermania the first year and the second year. Like, it's always close and dramatic. It's never just Harry Bignell beats everyone by £170, you know what I mean? It's
yeah.
Every final I've been in, it's like, it's never easy, do you know what I mean? But after the end of it, it looks quite convincing. But the same happened with Cy Skelton. With 12 minutes to go, there's one fish in it. He loses one, I net one. It looks quite convincing, but it wasn't, trust me. The year after, it happens with Luke Sears. He's catching me up. I've not had a fish for half an hour. And then it's like, he's one fish behind me. He don't get another bite, and I catch one, and it looks quite convincing at like £15 a head. But it's a swing of £1, £6, £7 fish.
Yeah.
And the same happened this year. So I had 125. Jay had 111. And then there was a 99, Mike McMillan.
Yeah.
Andy Power had 99 and ounces, fourth. There was a 96, Sam Brown. And Jimmy Brooks had 95.
Wow.
So let's say I have 115. The top 5 or 6 are all 2 fish away.
That's an amazing final.
It's 2 bites in the edge, isn't it?
Yeah.
I drop in there with 10 minutes to go and it goes clunk, £11, clunk, £11. You can literally, Hayfield's got some big fish and you could easily catch £20 in 3 fish in the last 10 minutes. And I had fish swirling there for the last 15. So it could have easily just gone bump, 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 3 and 3 chucks.
Yeah.
Go from 90 to 115, 120 easy. So it was a really good close final. luckily it just went my way, and I got the Maver Match This, and that's like not the last thing I wanted to win, but it was the next big thing I wanted to win. So
Phenomenal.
Big weight off my shoulders. Cause
Yeah.
I've done it now. Do you know what I mean?
Amazing, mate. Well done. Really well
cheers.
done. What I've got to ask you, out of my own curiosity, like you've talked about this circle of professional anglers. You go fishing for a living. People like Jamie Hughes, the same. On these big finals, when you're in them together, do you have like sharing things going on so that if one of you wins, you give the other a bit of money? And is that how you sort of work with each other?
Yeah, so like I always sort my bank runner out, and then I sort Christian out and Jamie out this year, so I had to deal with them too, and Jimmy Brooks. So I cost myself quite a lot of money that day, because I was like, do you want a grand, Jimmy? You want a grand, yeah. You want a grand, yeah. So you're trying to cover your day.
Yeah.
You know, if I can have a deal with 3 or 4 people, and one of them wins and I get a grand or 2 grand off them, like I always share with Jamie. I have done in the past when I won my 2 fish shows, when he won his 2 golden reels and Match This is. So the last 5 finals, we've benefited off each other. Yeah. So it's always nice to cover your thing, because if you draw rubbish, you know, like there's nothing you can do. Christian drew rubbish on the Match This. He would have done really well if he'd have drawn near any fish, because he was on the method. He was fishing identical to I was. We'd been up and practiced. He'd done really well in practice, and then he draws rubbish. And it's like, God, do you know what I mean? Like all that time and effort for nothing, but he's come away with 2 grand. He's going to be happy.
And he gets to see his mate who he's practiced with win, which is fantastic. Yeah,
so you're trying to cover your odds. I don't mind giving, a bit of money here and there. Like the first fish show I won, I shared with Will. Yeah. We've been up and practiced. Give Will some money. I have done every final I've won. Do you know what I mean? Like the money's nice, but you've got to cover your options as well, because you're not. I've been in, I don't know how many finals. I won't like to guess, but I'm close on 30, maybe over 30 if you include things like Fish North, Fish Midlands, Part D Masters. Probably 25, 30 finals. I don't keep count, but a lot of finals. And I remember counting back whatever it is. My first Fishermania was my 22nd final before I won one.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I won 2 back to back. It was like buses. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's what it can be. Like when it's your day, it's your day. And if you're on the method, but you got to do your own work. And I felt like I'd practiced hard at Hayfield for the last 4 or 5 years, because I've been in the Fishermania and the Match This there. So I've been up and practiced loads. But even this year, I see people turning up. I know it's a long way for some people, but I see people turn up for one match and they watch. Oh, he's caught shallow. Oh, right, the match has been one shallow. Right, it's going to be a shallow match. But one lake can be totally different to the next. So it's about knowing the moods of both lakes, so that when you draw the peg, you think, right, I understand how these fish are feeding. Because we all know how to fish shallow. We all know how to fish pellet short, pellet on the bottom, bomb, waggler, edge. But you've got to be on the method, do you know what I mean? And then when your chance comes, take it. Yeah. Like, I drew a brilliant peg on that final, but I felt like I fished a good match to catch it. I feel like a lot of people, without being disrespectful, wouldn't have won off that peg. No. Because they would have fished it different. They'd have tried to catch shallow, and they'd have missed that first hour and a half. And then where else are you going to get that run of fish from?
£70 you said you caught. Yeah.
You've missed that run of fish. It's like, the chance is gone sort of thing. You might catch £80 when you section and think, well, it was bad conditions, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, I felt like...
Right decision, right time. It's like you say, everyone knows a lot about it. It's just about implementing the right piece in the right place at the right time on the given peg. Yeah. That's not just blowing smoke up your backside, but I've seen you do it so many times. You've got all this experience, and you know when you sit down how to put it into place properly, definitely.
What a great bit of inspiration as well for everyone else, because like most people will just think, Andy Bennett turns up and just wins. But you did, was it 22 finals before you won one?
I won a big one, yeah.
That's mental, really, isn't it? So 22 times you have failed and come away and not won.
Yeah, I've been second twice at the Golden Reel. I'd been third at Part Dean. Not even close. When I was second on the Golden Reel, I was actually miles away. When I was £12 off winning the Match This and come fourth, but again, like I was chasing. So in theory, I was miles away.
Yeah,
Because it's like 15-20% of your weight extra that you need to catch. Where do you get that from? So it's all right saying, I come second once, but I never had a chance of winning that day. I had £138 and Fov had like 178. I'm £40 behind. I was never going to win that match. So like I've had a lot of close calls, but yeah, I think it was 22 or something like that, 21, 22 before I won one. It was definitely over 20.
Don't give up, innit? Just
No,
don't give
that's
up.
what
Keep
it is.
going.
Keep going.
Yeah, you've got to keep going.
You don't know when that next
There's
one
other
is.
people who literally straight in, first final, boom, they win it.
Yeah.
I think Christian did that.
Yeah.
I think Christian.
he said
I think
it,
Matty Dawes might have done it this year.
First fish out, wallop, have some of that.
Oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
And then you might not win it for another 20 years. So
But
get used to it.
you're now how many big final wins in I forgot it right. Have you had 3 in the last 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, since 2019.
So what's
2019,
that? Yeah, that's about
2020,
4.
2023.
150 grand in 3 days' work.
Are you extending the bar now? Is that the next move?
No.
What you done with money, Andy? Out of curiosity, can you tell us? Or
So
what
the
you're planning on doing?
My first 50, I'd sorted this bar. The second 50 went all on my house.
Nice.
And then my next 50 will just probably pay my mortgage off and get a new. Well, she's already bought a kitchen. She's already been out and picked it.
Cracking.
So, yeah.
Hey, she were pestering me about a ring this morning.
I know, but she can't have everything.
Yeah, can't spoil
or
it, mate, can you?
And she went kitchen. I was like, right, well, stop telling all your friends you want to get married because you make me look bad.
Yeah.
So it's her decision. She wanted a kitchen, and I said, well, I'm going to sort the finances out. You know, it's mad really because fishing is my hobby, but it's actually put me in a good position financially. So I owe a lot to fishing. Do you know what I mean? These big finals, when people are going in and you're asking about sharing, you don't want to come away empty-handed. So yeah, I give quite a bit of it away. We probably could have got married. Unless Jamie, if you want to give us 10 grand back, I'll get married.
He's got loads, he has anyway. I'd love to get Jamie on a show. I say it every time, and I text him loads of times saying, "Please come on podcast." But he obviously conflict of interest. He can't come on. But I'd love to have a good old Natalie.
It's good to tell everyone we have asked.
Yeah,
because people think that we don't.
I see him all the time and give him a big hug, and I'd so love to sit down and have a good natter with him about it because everyone always asks for it. But maybe one day we'll
never say never.
Yeah, never say never, never give up. Thank you for that, mate. Absolutely amazing insight. For everyone watching or listening, don't forget, we're not only going to be doing these shorter style on the road podcasts. We've got loads of the long ones, which we know that you all love. They're still happening in the studio as well. But just to mix the format up and to visit a few extra guests that maybe we couldn't get hold of, we've started to try a few of these. Bagger has been the guinea pig today, first one. There might be a few sound issues or lighting issues. Toad's learnt a lot about the setup, haven't you, mate?
Yeah, I've been quiet because I've just been keeping my eye on everything.
Yeah.
This is our first run through.
You can tell that he's concentrating because he normally interrupts a lot more than he has today.
No, but stress levels are high. But I think we should have something to show for it.
And we're going to get another couple, while we're here today with Bagger, we're going to get you another couple more tactical ones. So I've got a feeling by this afternoon there might be a pint on the table in Bagger's bar.
Absolutely. Well, that was part of the deal. That's why we came. We said you could have some beers and we'll play some pool in between.
Perfect. Let's have a game.